with us. We talked a couple of weeks ago about ACC sports and sports here in the Triangle area. Turned out to be folks like this. So we're going to give it another try. And what we're going to do is we're also going to be talking about ACC basketball. I have my little list here. But what we're going to start off with is there's a big game. Actually, I found a picture from 2013 where game day was at the PNC Arena, and they actually picked the Wolfpack to win that game against UNC. But UNC is playing the Wolfpack this Saturday at UNC. I think the game's at 2:00. Mr. Bob, what's your feeling about where UNC is, where NC State is, how that game is going to go? And if you like, go ahead and make a prediction.
Well, when you told me this is what we're going to talk about today, ACC basketball, I think I used the term looking at it from 30,000 feet because I don't follow it that closely. I'm not Art Chansky by any means, as anyone can look at me and tell. I'm not saying I'm not as handsome or more handsome. I'm just saying I'm not my buddy Art Chansky. But so I don't follow it with the degree that he knows, where he knows the shoe size and the names of all the aunts and uncles of all the players. Literally on this one, they could all come out and switch uniforms and I wouldn't know the difference. They're all a bunch of nice, I'm sure very nice and very talented young black gentlemen with funny haircuts. So I really don't know the difference if they came out and switched red and blue uniforms. I do know that a week ago, there was talk on Franklin Street of did Boba make a wrong choice and is it too late to get Wes Miller? I think that's debate abated somewhat. Now, it was debated. Now it's abated since they've won, I think, 2 or 3 in a row against teams that were no better than they were. So now we're getting back to the games that really count, having been totally blistered in Lawrence Joel, which didn't go down, I'm sure, well with pretty much anybody in Orange County. And the other 3 games that matter in basketball are the same 3 games that matter in football. The other Tobacco Road teams, Wake Forest State, Duke, and Carolina, and how you do against them is how the folks in the lower level will feel when they have to go into their law offices or their medical operating rooms or their business offices and deal with each other. And these are the games that really, all games count, but these games count a whole lot more. So this will be once again is Hubert the right guy? Can he beat whatever his name is? And that shows me how much I care with State, who apparently has not been the second coming of Jim Valvano or every case over there. And I know from hearing some of my State friends talk, they're wondering, no one is saying bring back Mark Gottfried. My God, no one would say that. No one is asking for bring back, where's Herb Sindak or where's Sidney Lowe? Which says something about the recent. Maybe the guy that coaches their women's team should coach their men's team, kind of like Anson Dorrance did with ACC soccer for years and years ago. Their man who coaches their women's basketball team is probably the best basketball coach in between Hillsborough Street and Western Boulevard right now. After what he did to the Carolina team. So maybe that would be the answer for NC State to switch. I don't know his name. I'm sure you do, you being a photographer and what the guy's name is, but he's done incredibly good. I don't know where they're rated right now in women's basketball. Number 1?
Yeah, they're actually number 1, and the coach is Coach West, and the men are playing on Saturday, and then on Sunday, the women are, UNC is playing, Carolina's playing NC State at Carmichael on Sunday. So
now, is that the much larger Carmichael, which is much larger than the Valvano court? Am I correct?
According to UNC's coach, yes, that is correct. But
even though there are 4,000 more seats in the revised Carmichael, or maybe 2,000, but the state people get 3,000 more people in their smaller Valvano Yale court. Is that right? Have I got that right?
You got that right. Plus, the state people love to see, and they will post pictures of images from Carmichael when UNC women are playing in there, and compare how many fans are at the UNC game versus how many fans are at the NC State game.
Are you telling me that state people are always comparing themselves to Carolina people? Oh, I didn't know that. I've only been around this stuff about 50 years. I never realized that. Are they a bit paranoid?
Well, I don't know if you call it paranoid. Some people say it's kind of like the little brother, little sister syndrome.
Okay. Well, anyway, back to your original point. I would assume this is a pretty even contest this Saturday. Both teams are probably on the bubble, I would guess. But I'm not sure where the bubble is right now as we come into February. So a game like this isn't going to help their strength of schedule element at all, but it will help the fans in the next few days until they all play another game. And I guess the Duke game will be coming up in a week or so. When does Carolina play Duke the first time this year?
I am not sure.
Oh my
I've kind of
goodness.
been behind.
Okay. Well, of course, again, that's the game that really counts. And I've told a couple of Carolina people that have asked me, why would they ask me? I don't know. But, should we have picked Wes Miller? Oh, my God, did we make a mistake? When can we get rid of this guy? The games for Hubert are really going to be starting next year when he's going head to head with John Schreier at Duke, and the new era in both schools kicks in. And that's a good game that really counts. So for Carolina people in the lower level who've an article I think I sent to you, my buddy Art Chansky, who I used to do a radio show with, but don't anymore, was kind of rough on Hubert in his weekly column or biweekly column or whatever it is with WCHL Chapelboro, questioning Hubert's coaching ability, that he may not be the third coming of Dean Roy. He didn't use the comparison with Matt Doherty. Thank goodness. We know that will be pretty scary if they start getting into Matt Doherty comparisons. Although I think he did mention the blowout against Wake Forest versus the loss to Binghamton or whatever it is, the worst loss in the history of the Matt Doherty era. He did bring up something like that. So maybe the comparison is already out there, which is real scary, which tells me that Hubert probably shouldn't buy any green bananas. But I would think the real test for Hubert's going to come when they start playing Duke, and that's just the way it is with Carolina. It's those 15 miles that the Carolina people and the Duke people measure very carefully. But to lose to State, and them obviously not being any better than Carolina talent-wise, will be a big test for Hubert, and people will quickly forget Boston College and Virginia Tech. And I think was there another one in there? How many games have they played since Wake Forest? 2? That's a question.
Yeah, it's either 1 or 2.
2. They played. Well, I know Virginia Tech and Boston College.
Right, and they won last night, and State lost last night. So
okay.
That's how they're coming into this.
Who did State play?
State played. Oh gosh, I listened to that game. Notre Dame. They were up in Notre Dame. They
Yeah.
were close at the half, and then lost it towards the end.
Okay. Well, again, it matters, and I'd always say that the records don't matter until they play each other, and that's what counts. And would defeating Hubert Davis in Carmichael or in the Ding Dome be a big deal for Coach Keats? Is that his name? Kevin Keats?
Yep,
Keats?
Kevin Keats.
Something. KK. If that's a big deal for him, obviously it would be a big deal for him. I don't know what his record is against Roy. I think Roy kind of owns State, but maybe 1 or 2 times in the last 3 or 4 years, over how long Coach Keats has been there, if he ever beat Roy. But he's playing Hubert now, so that's all that really matters.
Right. You mentioned Wake Forest. Forbes seems to be doing pretty well over there. But in your most recent column, and folks, if you're looking for BobLee's recent columns, you go to BobLeeSays.com, and you can pull up the information. Also, you can follow him on Facebook. So you've got several different opportunities, and Bob always sprinkles in a little bit.
No excuse for not being able to find me.
Right. There's no excuse for being able to find you. There's got it right up underneath your name there. It's worth listening to, following. And the other thing too is Mr. BobLee has a tendency to throw in some other opinions in there. So you don't just get sports, but you do get sports primarily. But in your latest column that I saw, you were talking about memories of Tobacco Road, and that in actuality, the Tobacco Road no longer exists. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
No longer exist is probably a bit over. It's rapidly fading away. And let me give an anecdote that's one of my very favorite ACC basketball stories. And I think I've told it on my column a couple of times, but it's such a great story. It took place somewhere between 12 and 15 years ago, I think. So I'm not real sure. I think it was about 12 years ago. In the pre-COVID era, if we can remember back that far, I used to attend a men's fellowship / Bible study over in Chapel Hill, which sounds very strange. We called it Anne Frank's attic. I think if the word had gotten out that 50 baby booming Christians were meeting somewhere, somebody would have kicked the doors in and we'd all be in a rendition cell somewhere in Hillsborough. But I digress. Anyway, Danny Lotz was part of it, who passed away in the last 5 years. And also a dear friend of mine who passed away a year ago, Albert Long, had started this men's fellowship, and it'd gone for about 15 years. And now, of course, we've changed around because of all the rules about COVID. They're still holding it, but I'm no longer allowed in Chapel Hill with or without a mask, or with or without a vax card, neither of which I carry. So we haven't met. But anyway, 12 or 15 years ago, Sylvia Hatchell was the coach. Remember her?
Yes.
And Lenny Rosenbluth. Now, I'm just going to use the name right now, and I don't know how long you've been in this area, but I hope for your sake, the name Lenny Rosenbluth means something to you. I'll stop right now, and you just give me a yes or no.
I will give you a no.
Okay. Well, you're going to be.
But I will show you this before you start. We talked about this last time. Back in 1994, Hardee's were selling these basketballs, and that was back when Florida State just joined the league. So we went from 8 to 9 teams, and I'm trying to get this. There we go. Dyslexia. So yeah, I go back as far as 94, but I'm sorry.
Well,
I have to show you this. My kids were never allowed to play with this ball, by the way.
As I tell this incredible story, you will see where I'm going before I get there. The punchline you won't. But anyway, Sylvia Hatchell, and they were in the process of renovating Carmichael from 9,000 and downsizing it for the official court for the women's basketball program. And downsizing it, very similar to what happened over at Reynolds Coliseum and so on. But anyway, so she was playing her games. The women were playing their games in the Dean Dome, and this was the first time. The next week. This was on a Thursday. On the following Saturday, Gino Auriemma and the mighty Connecticut Huskies were coming in to Chapel Hill for the first time ever, and of course they were rated #1, as they were forever and ever and ever until this year, I think. And so Sylvia had this idea of having Lenny Rosenbluth come over and give a pep talk to her team as they were practicing in the Dean Dome after our meetings. We had a lunch meeting. So 1:30, I went over with Lenny and Danny Lotz and Albert Long. And we walked into the Dean Dome. They were practicing on the floor. Of course, there were no fans there. And Sylvia knew that we were coming. And so she kind of halted her practice and had the players kind of gather around at the center circle there in the Dean Dome Stadium. She said, "We've got a very special guest today to come talk to us, Lenny Rosenbluth." Well, so Lenny walks out. Now, Lenny Rosenbluth was the National Player of the Year in 1957, and he was a leader of the Carolina undefeated team that defeated Wilt Chamberlain in the triple overtime game. So that ties in with Castleman D. Chesley and the beginning of televising ACC basketball. So Lenny walks out there, and Lenny's a 6'6", 6'7" guy, and he's in his early 80s now. You can do 1957, figure he was 22, and do the math, and he's in his mid 80s now. And so he comes out, and she introduces him and points up to the rafters, and his name and jersey is on the first row, because he was a National Player of the Year. So along with Tyler Hansbrough and Michael and others who have held that honor, and I don't remember exactly the protocol for which level your jersey is hanging from, but Lenny Rosenbluth is on the front level. So the players all looked up at that, and okay. And so he starts talking, and he starts giving some anecdotes from that weekend in Kansas City that basically ended up creating Tobacco Road basketball and, of course, Carolina's undefeated championship. And he starts telling anecdotes. Now, I knew all those anecdotes because I remember as a little boy, 10 years old, where I was watching that game on a little black and white TV in my living room with my dad. And there are hundreds of thousands of people across North Carolina, many of whom, even more, except some have died, that remember where they were watching it on that Saturday night from Kansas City as Carolina played University of Kansas in a triple overtime game that's arguably the greatest finals ever, and people will argue about that, but I wouldn't. It has to be triple overtime, undefeated team. And so he's telling these anecdotes. One of them has about the Carolina's little guard, Tommy Kearns, who is one of three of those players, along with Rosenbluth and Joe Quigg, that are still living off of that team. The coaches and the managers, everyone from that 57 team have passed away, except for Joe Quigg, who was one of the starters, Lenny Rosenbluth, and Tommy Kearns, who's a retired stockbroker up in New York. And so he's telling the story about how Coach McGuire sends out Tommy Kearns, who's 5'10", 5'9", to jump against 7'1" or 2 or 3 or whatever, Wilt Chamberlain to psych him out, and people remember that. And he's telling the story, and I'm standing kind of behind Lenny, and I'm looking at these girls who are all 18, 19 years old, and they're staring at this man, and this look of total, why do I care what this goofy old man is talking about? And it occurred to me, and as soon as he finished, I said something to he and Danny. It's just the fact that I did a sort of a stage whisper to Danny. I said, these girls have absolutely no clue who this man is. And as kids tend to do, they don't care. He said, what do you mean they don't know who Lenny Rosenbluth is? I said, Danny, these girls don't know who Wilt Chamberlain is. Now, that's not saying these girls don't, are dumb or stupid or whatever else. They're a totally different generation. Why would they know? They probably know who Michael Jordan is because they're wearing his shoes. And you think, well, Lenny Rosenbluth, one of in any group of 5 greatest players in Carolina history, he's going to be there if there's any baby boomer on the voting panel, because he started it all. With all due respect to Hook somebody and Gene Glamick and a couple of others who played back in the Peach Basket era. But Lenny Rosenbluth was National Player of the Year. But these girls had no idea who Lenny Rosenbluth was. They had no idea who Wilt Chamberlain is. Now, you want to feel old. It's when you're realizing you're around these girls playing major college basketball, and they have no clue going back 60, 65 years. And you think, well, why should they? And that was kind of the premise of my column, the title of which was Thanks for the Memories, Councilman D. Chesley, otherwise known as C.D. Chesley. He was the entrepreneur promoter that thought it would be a good idea to arrange to send the live TV signal from Kansas City back to North Carolina, that there might be enough interest to people to follow the Tar Heels. And that all seems silly now because you see every game, almost every practice of every major Power 5 school is on TV now. Back in 1957, that was not the case at all. In fact, I don't think the college basketball probably wasn't on at all. And certainly regionally it didn't. There might be something from Reynolds Coliseum, but this was prior to the Dixie Classic, prior to everything that everybody knows about Carolina basketball, Duke, everything else. And that game turned out that on Friday, they played back-to-back. They played Friday and they played Saturday. Carolina played Michigan State in the semifinal, and their star player was Jumping Johnny Green, and it went to triple overtime. And Carolina won, of course. The next night, they're playing Kansas with this incredible athlete, this freak of nature, Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain, and they beat them in triple overtime. So back-to-back triple overtime games within 24 hours of each other, and Carolina wins. And ACC basketball, Tobacco Road hysteria, the fuse was lit on that. Now, my premise in my article is those generations now, my generation, a lot of my friends have passed away from natural causes. And, I'm thankful for every day myself and good health. But the generation that filled the lower level of the Ding Dome when Skipper Bowles raised money to build it, most of we'll say the fatter cats, deep pockets of the Rams Club and the Wolfpack Club and the Iron Dukes, or in my generation or slightly older. So we are passing away. It's a reality. Now you can say, well, why would ACC basketball be losing some of its fervor? One is the group that started it all, and that went through the eras of David Thompson and Michael Jordan and Tyler Hansbrough and Christian Laettner and all these other things since 1957, that generation is passing on. And you can say, well, it has to do with the one and dones. Yeah, that the fact that fans, home and away, hated rivals, don't get to know the players like they used to, because the players are gone in a year. The really good ones are gone in a year. So you don't get 4 years of Grant Hill and Christian Laettner. You don't get 4 years of David Thompson. You don't get 4 years of any of the great players, because they're gone. I mean, Michael was there 3 years instead of 4, but the 2 year and 1 years are gone. So the players don't get the personality hook like J.J. Redick. Everybody learned to hate J.J. Redick, and of course Laettner being the ultimate one. Everybody in North Carolina knew who he was. The great moments in sport, in ACC basketball. I mentioned when David Thompson fell out of the rafters. This would have been in 73 or 74, the year they won it all. They were playing the Eastern Regionals, and they were playing Pitt. Pitt was in the Big East at the time, in Reynolds Coliseum in a Eastern Regional game. And Thompson, the Skywalker, went up so high that he tripped over Phil Spence's shoulder and landed on his head in Reynolds Coliseum. The place went totally sound. It was not a sound. They were sure he had died. He landed straight on his head from 6.5 feet up in the air. And they took him off. And the rest of the story is about 30 minutes, and the game continued. And about 30 minutes later, he walked back into the stadium with his head wrapped up like a Islamic with a babushka or whatever. And the place blew up. They said it was the loudest sound in the history of Reynolds Coliseum. That they all saw he was there. That David is back. He's alive. And they didn't play. He wasn't in his uniform, but he was alive and he was back. And State went on to win. And there is a disagreement. Were there more people who now claim they were in Reynolds Coliseum that night and that day and saw that? Or were there more people in Carmichael Auditorium when Carolina came from 8 points down with 13 seconds to go against Duke? At least 127,000 people claimed they were in either one or both and had the tickets to prove it. Now, you can do the math. The Reynolds Coliseum sat, 6,000 people, and Carmichael sat 9,000 people, but well over 130,000 people claimed they were there. Absolutely, I was there. Hold on, I got my ticket here somewhere. Bless their hearts. But these great moments in ACC history, and I guess if you were Duke, it would be Laettner versus Kentucky, either when he stomped on the guy or when the Grant Hill 3/4 length pass, turn and shoot, are great moments. And certainly we're losing that with the one and dones. Now you could go back, 3 years, 4 years, when Carolina lost at the buzzer to Villanova with the 3/4 length, sort of the Walter Davis shot by Villanova that beat Carolina a couple of years later, and they came back and won the next year. You can say the ACC tournament is no longer means anything. It means something, but it's not the event of which the social event of the season that it used to be, when people would pay money to their booster clubs simply to be on the list to get ACC tournament tickets. And they were the most prized thing. I mean, if you knew someone who got 2 of them, they were a celebrity in your social circle because they got ACC tournament tickets to go to Greensboro for this incredible event, which now doesn't even matter because 4, 5, or 6 teams normally are going to go on and play anyway. So it's not the event that it was back when Dean had to win the ACC tournament in order to get to the regionals, in order to get to the Final Four. And of course, the most famous game or the best game in the history of the ACC, which would have been the David Thompson team versus the Lynn Elmore, Tom McMillan, Maryland team in the finals, and all these other things that a lot of my generation remember like it happened yesterday. And to tell them that's not the way the current generations feel about it. And we've got a lot of people who moved here over the years that don't have those layers of memories. It's not like it was. And that's a shame. It's called progress. Nothing is like it was. And we're not going to get into politics, but everything changes. It's just the nature of life and culture and society. And ACC, Big Tobacco Road Basketball, is not what it was. We don't have the coaches with the personalities that we had at one time. I mean, people don't remember that Valvano and Krzyzewski came into the ACC in the same year as young coaches, taking over programs that were good but not great. State had been nationally ranked back in the Everett Case days, and then Norm Sloan came in with David Thompson in that group, and then I don't remember who would have been next after that. Well, then finally Valvano in the mid '80s, and you had the two guys, Valvano and Krzyzewski, going against the well-established Dean, and then Dean stays, and then here comes Krzyzewski in for his 40-year run, and then Roy, and in the middle you have the Darty era, 3 or 4 years. But you had these coaches that were as well known as or better known now than the players. I can't, other than Zion, who was an iconic name, I can't name a Duke player of the last 6 or 7 years. They're only there for 3 or 4 semesters. Oh, not 3 or 4 semesters, a semester and a half. They come in September and they're gone in April. And I'm sure there are Duke fans who can name them all. I think there's one that plays, Tatum, that plays for Boston now that's real good. But all those big men, I don't remember where they were. I don't remember who they were. And that's partly of my fault because I don't pay attention like I used to. There was a time in the 70s and 80s I could have named the starters of all 4 Tobacco Road teams, and everybody could. I can name most of the reserves. You certainly knew the coaches. And it's just not that way anymore. And I've asked other friends of mine, is it my fault? Is it because my interests have changed? I'd rather go fishing, or I'd rather listen to a book than I would watch ACC basketball. And I'm a little bit odd that way. I'm a little bit odd in a lot of ways. But they also say, yeah, it's just not like it used to be. I've kind of outgrown it, and I don't live and die with it. And I think that's the way with a lot, excuse me, a lot of the fans. The ACC, of course, has grown, and I understand why that had to happen. But who really cares about Boston College or Pitt or Syracuse anymore? The thing with Syracuse, you've got the coach that everybody hates, Boeheim, and they will remember verbatim what he said about Greensboro a few years ago. And, you know, the fans knew to hate that. But, I mean, what fans hate Coach Keats at State? Nobody hates Coach Keats at State. And I would say within the conference, I mean, I know that what Leonard Hamilton has been at Florida State, and he's done real well. Nobody hates him. Nobody hates the guy at Miami. I'm sure Bobby Crimmins is no longer at Georgia Tech. I'm not that clueless. I have no idea who the coach is at Georgia Tech.
Well,
nor do I really need it. It's not going to be a question on Jeopardy.
There may be a new coach at Georgia Tech next year.
Maybe it's going to be the guy that got fired from Louisville early this week. So, I mean, again, I'm not saying we're not going to watch basketball anymore, because people will, but there's just not the emotional attachment to it that there was. And it's a series of things, and you can't blame anybody. I mean, of course, State fans will blame John Swofford for pretty much everything. And even though he's gone, they're still blaming him. As I think we talked last week about when State's bowl game got canceled right before the kickoff, that 80% of the State student fan base immediately blamed John Swofford. How? He's not involved anymore. I don't know, but somehow they called them to call that game because it's always Swofford's fault. Okay.
Let's you were talking about expansion. We're talking about Greensboro games. I think the women continue to play at Greensboro. I think there's only been one season that they haven't had their tournament at Greensboro, but the men this year, I think, are playing up in Brooklyn, if I'm not mistaken, and they kind of try to rotate it. There's also been talk about possibly moving the ACC headquarters from Greensboro to Charlotte. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see that as happening, or
Well, I understand originally why it was a big deal to have a presence in New York. So to play, not in Madison Square Garden, because for some reason they can't play there, but to play in the Barclays Center, or whatever it's called this week, in Brooklyn. The ACC basketball, even despite what I've just been talking about for the last 10 minutes, it's already a national brand. You don't have to introduce ACC basketball to some fan in Corvallis, Oregon, or Albuquerque, New Mexico, or wherever. They know ACC basketball. They've heard about it. They may hate it because they think their conference is equal to or better. So I don't know what the advantage, other than you're a little bit closer to Boston College, Syracuse, and Pitt than you are to the other 10 or 11, depending on whether or not you count Notre Dame, other schools in the conference. What's the point of going up there? It's already not the tough ticket that it used to be. So you go up there, and how many fans in North Carolina, State, Duke, Wake Forest, are going to go up there to stand out front of the building and try to get a ticket from the teams that lose, like they used to in Greensboro. They would camp out to get the losers' tickets in order to, by the time they got down to two teams playing on Sunday, you had the building was divided half and half, and it was full. So I don't know why the idea of playing in Brooklyn matters anymore. Playing in College Park or playing in Washington mattered when you had Maryland there. It doesn't matter anymore, and Maryland should be in the ACC. That's a ridiculous move for everybody involved. Nobody in the Big Ten cares about Maryland. The only team they care less about in the Big Ten, and I have some familiarity with Wisconsin as a judge, is Rutgers. They don't even consider Rutgers a member of the Big Ten, and they have to play them each year. It's like playing Georgia State or something. They don't care. They're going to beat them, and they don't mean anything. And Maryland's the same way in the Big Ten. So Maryland made a mistake in leaving. And I think most of their fans would probably agree with that. But should it always be played in Greensboro? I don't know. I can see moving it to Atlanta every 3 or 4 years in some sort of rotation. But Greensboro and Charlotte, does it give an unfair advantage to the 4 North Carolina schools where the game is being played? Who is in attendance doesn't matter anyway. They could play it in a sound stage. They could play it in Pinewood Studios in London, where they filmed the James Bond movies, and just put it on a sound stage and pipe in crowd noise. It's a TV sport now. So the idea of where it's played, I think, is greatly overrated. I know it was a big social scene in Greensboro, and everyone would go to Stamey's barbecue and the other traditions that they had where they would stay. And it was a big deal for all 4 of the schools back when those 4 schools sort of dominated the conference back in the 60s and 70s. And that's not the case anymore. And so, again, Greensboro, Charlotte, Atlanta works for me. The year they had it in Tampa was a complete disaster. That was awful. Oh, God, that was so ridiculous. Bless his heart. That was not Swofford's greatest idea. They don't need to have it in Florida. So Atlanta, I'm okay with. Don't have it in the Mercedes-Benz Center. Don't have the ACC tournament in a 70,000 seat football coliseum. Have it in a place with 20,000 seats at the most, but they're trying to sell it out, and people aren't going to come to the ACC tournament and pay blood and give their blood in order to get a ticket because it doesn't matter anymore. Your next question was moving the ACC from Grandover to Charlotte. Once again, unless you're the guy that owns the property that they're renting in Grandover, and I assume they probably own the building there, does that really matter? Let's say they've got, I don't know how many people are employed by the ACC conference, let's say 50, counting clerical. I don't know, maybe 100. I don't know. Can't imagine how many junior assistant, associate directors of whatever there can be. But so it's not the ACC moving from Greensboro does not counter this week's news that they're going to build a supersonic bomber jet plane out at the PTI airport. They're not equal events. One does not destroy the economy of the Greensboro if the conference moves 80 miles south to Charlotte. So I'm okay with that. I don't know what the advantages are, but I don't think it's going to make a whole lot of difference one way or the other. How do you feel about that, Gene? You got opinions. Nobody cares about them, but I do.
I was going to say it might make Mr. Phillips, the new commissioner's job, a little bit easier, because I tell you what, and again, it's probably because his first year, well, it's again taking out COVID year, but I've seen him at a bunch of events. Nice person to talk to. Actually, I don't know if you Robert Crawford's a photographer. He shoots a lot of stuff, and Robert's big thing this year is he's kind of seems to be on his own farewell tour. He's getting all these pictures with all these quote unquote celebrities. So we're at the ACC football championship game, and he rounds up Mr. Phillips and gets a group shot of us all together. But I think it would be easier for him to get flights out of Charlotte than it is out of Greensboro. But he's been at a lot of events, and I think he's hit as many as 2 or 3 events in a day. So
Sure.
I kidded him. I told him he's managing by walking around, except he's getting to fly around to all these different places.
Well, that's important. Well, he never comes to our stadium, so he doesn't like us. So we're going to get the bad referees, and the whole paranoia.
I saw him at a state game the other day. He was talking to Boo Corrigan, and I think Boo's now on the was it football championship
not
committee?
just on it. He is the chairman this year.
Right.
Now, think about this one now. Plant this conspiracy theory. Boo Corrigan comes in as head of the committee that's going to choose the Final Four in football when state is going to be nationally ranked maybe in the top 10 because they do have a strong team coming back. So if state ends up doing real well, is Boo Corrigan, son of the late, great Gene Corrigan, going to use his influence, Swaffordich, and get his Wolfpack in over much more deserving teams from other parts of the country? What say you, Gene?
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if I'm that concerned about it because one of my personal favorite coaches, Jim Grove, who used to be at Wake Forest, is also on that committee. So maybe he'll keep Boo in line.
I love Jim Grove. Again, I saw that too, and I thought that was interesting. And whose parting words to David Clawson was, "Get old and stay old," in terms of the age of your roster, which Clawson says is the secret to his success. Of course, that he's playing older players because he redshirts all his freshmen.
Yeah, and you were talking about Rutgers. They actually got to play Rutgers down at the
Gator Bowl
in Jacksonville game. I hate using the advertiser's name. I just like to refer to the old names. But Gator Bowl. That's it. The Gator Bowl. And yeah, he seems to be happy. His wife was there on the field. Actually, she started taking a selfie of the two of them, and I'm like, at a certain age, you shouldn't be taking selfies. So I said, "Ma'am, would you mind if I just take your pictures?" And she's like, "Okay."
Who's that, Grove?
No, not Grove. Clawson's wife.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, before the game starts, she was down on the field, walking around taking pictures with a clear bag because no security.
Selfie is not the same thing as a sex tape.
No, it's not. And the interesting thing is, I went to this is a side story. Went to the Rolling Stones when they were at the Carter Finley Stadium, and you got all these older folks bringing their youngsters and their kids, and they're trying to take selfies, and it was painful to watch. I'm like, look, let me take a picture. Let me give you your cameras. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to steal your camera because you can outrun me. And I think I got a whole bunch of decent pictures of them because people over trying to take selfies, it just doesn't work.
That doesn't work.
I mean, we veered off to ACC football a little bit. We got about another 5-10 minutes here. I've got a question for you. Football game's supposed to be an hour. One of the sportscasters that we talked about last time, will not go mentioned, said, the games are too long. Maybe college football should do something to cut down on the number of plays. And when I heard this is a personal pet peeve, and you and I have talked about this before. Before television, you could go to an ACC football game, and the game would be over in 2.5 hours. And then if it was on Raycom Sports, it would be a 3-hour game. Now it's gotten to 3.5, unless you got a Thursday night game on ESPN, and all of a sudden it's 4 hours. It's still an hour game. And I think the last time the ACC signed an agreement with ESPN was able to add an extra 1.5 minutes to each half. So right there, you got an extra 3 minutes. Plus, now you got the instant replays on just about everything. Also, talk about conspiracy theories. The conspiracy theory is ACC does that so that they're getting the right call percentage is higher because you check things that are even correct, but you still want to check it to keep your percentage high.
All right. So, and you're exactly right. The game football is still 4 15-minute quarters, right?
Yep.
It's an hour of playing time. So, I mean, unlike baseball, which you can stretch on forever, which is a big complaint with baseball, which because it doesn't play with the clock, football and basketball have very defined game time. Now, I know who you're talking about that brought up that question. He may have just been playing devil's advocate and giving his listeners something to talk about. And it wasn't my buddy Chansky, by the way. I know who it was. Which plays in the Kansas City Buffalo game would he want to take out? I mean, in fact, you can take any of the 4 NFL games. I'm not an NFL guy anymore, and that's to talk for another day. But those 4 NFL games this past weekend were as good a pure sports entertainment as you could ever ask for. And the best one was the last one. And you kept saying, well, that one was good. Well, that one was good. That one was good. And then about 7 o'clock Sunday night, you're saying, oh, my Lord, I've never seen anything like this. And truly, it was incredible. And my wife kept wanting to know, well, who do we want to win? Who do we want to win? I said, it really doesn't matter. You don't have to live and die. You can just say, wow. Here comes Josh Allen, boom, 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 touchdown. Here comes Mahomes, boom, 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 touchdown. Now, one of the websites that I go to is Outkick, which is Clay Travis's sports/politics, sports, pretty girls in bikinis website. And a guy, one of their board monkey guys like me, came on Monday morning and said, that was awful. All 4 of those teams got screwed by their defense. And I'm saying, why? It's what happened with Kansas City moving down, and actually you say the same thing with Los Angeles coming down and scoring. Why is that a defensive fault versus an offense doing good? The idea of offense versus defense, if one does good, the other does bad. You got to blame it on something. The offense couldn't score. The defense couldn't stop them. Why do you look at the glass half empty? The glass was over full with some incredible offensive plays. And, like two things fans say that I just roll my eyes. One is playing in the Green Bay in January is miserable. Well, that's the way football ought to be played, in the mud and the blood and the beer and the hot cold. Bull! You take away all the elements of of a team when you put in weather conditions, whether it's pouring rain or freezing rain. I was a Dallas Cowboy fan back in the 60s, and the Ice Bowl just killed me because Bob Hayes couldn't run on solid ice in the frozen tundra. So that, and the other question is, I've completely forgotten it now. One is playing in cold weather. I've forgotten what my other point was. Oh, what the heck? It'll just keep going.
No, we were talking about the fact that football games haven't gotten longer because of plays. Football games have gotten longer because of more commercials.
And what's the straw stirring the drink in football and basketball now? The TV.
Right. And we talked about this last time. It's your in-person experience in the stadiums and in the arenas is not what it used to be. Now, again, if I'm covering a state game and Red Panda shows up to juggle a whole bunch of stuff while she's on a unicycle at halftime, I'm sticking around for that. But especially, and the other thing I noticed this season in particular is the amount of timeouts for injured players. Yes, I'm going to sound like an old guy, but in the old days, it's kind of like, okay, come over, get your player off the field, and let's move on with the game. Now you have these referees calling timeouts for injured players. The guy comes out with the clock on the stick that says 1 minute and 37 seconds, and so basically for 1 minute and 37 seconds.
And all you're saying is they're going to bring out the golf cart. They're going to bring out the golf cart because that means he might have a broken neck, and eventually he gets up and walks off because all it was a cramp, maybe.
Right, and I've seen the golf cart. I think I've covered at least one game every weekend, if not 2. And I think I've only saw a golf cart come out twice this year in the entire time. So,
well, now the one point that you did well to bring up, and don't find a fan that'll argue this: the replays. Yes, that stops the clock, and yet time, the arc of the sun going across the sky continues to move during those interminable replay checks. So yes, if the 3 hours in the stadium versus the 3.5 hours in the stadium, yeah, a certain amount of that is spent watching the referee look into the little TV and come back and say we approve it, we disapprove it, first down one way or the other. So do you not want to do as many instant replays? I thought instant replays of get the call right, because every conference now, every Power 5 conference boasts that it has the worst officials in college football or pro football, either way. We have the worst. No, we have the worst. No, Pac-12 says they have the worst officials. It's a point of pride to say your officials, and it's basketball or football, of course, are the worst. And you say, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to get full-time ones? Well, I don't know. They just need to get ones that understand the rule book. They get the rules right. It's just whether it was on your team or not. And basically every pass, and passing is what most teams do, is going to have a potential pass interference on one side or the other. And if you're on defense, then the offensive receiver obviously pushed the cornerback down and grabbed the ball. And he should not only be thrown out of the game, he should be run out of the country, or vice versa. So half of the stadium is always, and half of the people watching are always going to throw up their hands in total, oh my God, this was even worse than last week when they stole the game from us. Well, so you think, well, either the officials are crooked and they're on the take, of course, or they've been ordered by John Swafford, of course, to make sure State doesn't win. But that's just part of sports. And, it goes back to umpires. Kill the ump is not a phrase that just came out in the last 10 years. They've been
right.
saying,
and smart coaches will tell you you've got to play well enough to beat the other team and the refs.
Well, that's what they all say, but I don't know. In my next life, I want to be a baseball umpire, to be a part of the sport, the game. Would I be what's West's first name? Joe West. Would I be a Cowboy Joe West? Probably. And Cowboy Joe West and Angel Hernandez and a couple of the umpires do interject themselves into the game a little bit more than they should, kind of like Lou Bello and Charlie Ekman used to do as basketball officials. And you can't do that anymore because people already don't like you. And if they see you strutting around or going into histrionics, that's just going to play on their paranoia anyway. But I don't know, how do you get away from having officials unless you're going to do a American Idol? Okay, fans, cast your vote. Was he over the line, or did he not break the plane? Cast your votes, and you've got 30 seconds to decide which way it's going to be. You're never going to shut up that part of the fan base. It's part of sports.
Well, if we got, and you said the green line is one of your wife's favorite things to watch on television. If we have the green line, do we even need the chain gang anymore? Can we do that electronically?
It seems now that when it's close, when the guy goes and kind of stretches, they don't bring it out as much as they used to. They seem to be going, it's a yellow line, or on my TV, it's a yellow line. You might want to adjust your colors. But the yellow line for the first down line, green line? That sounds like something involving immigration.
But, no, that's the green mile.
Okay, green mile. Yeah, okay. That's another connotation. But they just kind of look at the yellow line. I'm always fascinated by the yellow line. How do they do that? I've seen it explained, and that doesn't help me. That's kind of like someone trying to explain electricity to me. I don't get that. Much less how they do that holographic line. It cuts right across the player's foot, and it's down there. You probably know because you're a tech guy. Don't even try to explain it to me. It's just magic.
But the interesting thing is you can now see that on some of the stadiums have actually on their boards will now be able to show that. Folks, we got to tie this up because it's the top of the hour. I always love talking to Mr. BobLee. Look, if you want more, he's got you come out with a column, about 2 or 3 times a week?
I used to, and then I kind of got lazy, and then I realized how much I enjoy doing it. So now I'm doing about 3 every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And the next one I'm going to do for all those people down in Eastern North Carolina is the title of it's already been done. I come up with the title first, and then I write 800 words about the title. I'm not sure that Sidney Sheldon and Tom Clancy did it that way, but it works for me. But it's called My Hometown from a Heaven to a Hell. And I grew up in Kinston, and Kinston is famous now for winning a whole lot of basketball championships and possibly being the poorest community in America, or certainly in North Carolina, and how it went from being a happy days, idyllic community in the 50s and 60s to now being a crime-fested poverty-stricken community that gets wiped out by the flooded Neuse River every 2 years. And that's going to be my column. So I write about a number of different things, and somehow it all kind of goes back to sports because that's what gets my my reader base all jazzed up. But BobLeeSays.com. And please, I want, before we do this again, that people do have to Google Lenny Rosenbluth and Wilt Chamberlain. That's going to be on the final exam.
There you go. That's everybody's homework assignment for this week. Mr. BobLee, thank you very much. Folks, thank you for watching. We had just under 400 folks watch this last time. We're hoping to build the this may not be as exciting as Mr. BobLee talking to Mr. Archansky, because those two sometimes do this. But I love hearing them talk, so we will hopefully be able to do this again. Folks, thank you very much. And this will be posted on Facebook, and we'll also have it on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Mr. BobLee.